Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta will become the first province in Canada to mandate police officers to wear body-worn cameras. Local business owners in Lethbridge impacted by the Lethbridge hotel fire and water main break downtown are not happy with the city. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is feeling more heat in regards to alleged foreign interference of our federal elections. Political reporter Brian Lilly has the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government will be mandating police officers throughout the province to wear body-worn cameras. Public Safety Minister Mike Ellis says this will help Albertans to feel safer and have trust that police will assist and be fair in doing so. Ellis says he's hoping to have police wear body-worn cameras as soon as possible.
Albertans have a right to feel safe and secure across this province, and that's precisely what we're doing here. In order for the police to be that extension, there must be a deep level of trust within the community. That's why our government is focused on assisting and building trust between police services and the community through initiatives like this. And today we are strengthening police accountability and transparency in the province that will help to ensure that every dollar that is being invested in our police service is having their intended outcome, all while ensuring that police can confidently, in a moment of crisis, in a call to action, help and protect and serve Albertans.
Ellis adds that Alberta will be the first province to mandate body-worn cameras. Alberta's education minister says the province will be making student transportation safer and much more affordable. Adriana Lagrange says all of our children need to be supported and protected.
We are providing school authorities with an additional $414 million over the next 3 years to support school transportation improvements. This includes a 32% increase in funding for the 23-24 year. This increased funding will ensure Alberta's student transportation system is safer for students, more affordable for parents and families, and responsive to the funding needs of our school authority partners.
Local business owners here in Lethbridge are not happy following the recent Lethbridge hotel fire and subsequent water main break that put them out of their building. The group, represented by Whole Lotta Love Piercing Studio, are demanding answers from the city as to the cause of the main break. They also say they're frustrated, saying they've been kicked to the curb. The staff of the piercing studio also told us they're worried about asbestos from the Lethbridge hotel.
Our building saw like 6 feet of water in the basement. We kind of want to know where that water came from, if it runs the risk of asbestos in it, if they're testing for it, what they're going to do. We all operate family businesses. Our own families come into our small businesses. There's definitely a concern on that. There's concern on how they've left the hotel and any kind of residual asbestos just hanging out in the pile of rubble. So, and we can't seem to get answers on that either.
Staff from this city said business owners will have to reach out to their insurance providers to figure out if they can get any compensation for the closure. The Director of Emergency Management for the City of Lethbridge, Luke Palmer, told us asbestos is currently being removed from the Lethbridge Hotel, and the city is making sure the business owners are safe from the potentially cancer-inducing material.
What I can share is that we're working closely with both Alberta Environment, Occupational Health and Safety to make sure that what they require us to do to dispose of and treat those contaminated materials, that we're doing so properly. So a lot of this is under the direction of the province and the oversight of them as well. Things are moving well. At this point, our focus is on the investigation, and at some point we will likely transfer the continued disposal to another provider, either through the building owner or OH&S direction.
Palmer says the city is still determining the cause of the water main break, and for now, business owners will be given up to 3 weeks as a time frame before they can head back to set up shop once again. You know, thanks to an increase in funding, the Lethbridge Housing Authority will be able to help around 200 people on its waiting list for affordable housing. The group says they're receiving an increase of $466,000 to its rental assistance benefit for the 2023-2024 budget. Officials say they will also be receiving one-time funding of $586,000 to support the communities the LHA serves with rental assistance. They say there are more than 800 needy people in our city who are looking for safe, secure, and affordable housing. A man who served 25 years in the Royal Canadian Artillery and who's now a Legion member, Glenn Miller, was recently bestowed a special award called the Order of the Crown of the Kingdom of Belgium. That's one of the European nation's highest honors. BCN's Micah Quinn caught up with Miller to talk about the work he does in our community for our veterans and why this medal is so important to him.
Glenn Miller, a local historian and the communications co-chair for the Lethbridge Legion, was honored in Edmonton on March 9th for the long-standing work that he does for veterans here in Lethbridge and across Canada. The award was presented to Miller by Patrick Van Giel, the ambassador of Belgium to Canada.
I found out in November that I would be receiving the Order of the Crown, and they have various classes, just like the Order of Canada has various classes. So the Order of the Crown, I'd be made a Knight Order of the Crown. I'm quite honored to be recognized by a foreign government for the work I do here in Canada.
Miller has worked with the Last Post Fund to ensure every veteran receives a dignified funeral, burial, and a grave marker. He's also worked hand in hand with the Galt Museum and Archives, the Lethbridge Military Museum, and the Lethbridge Legion. During the medal ceremony, Van Giel had nothing but high praise for Miller.
Your outreach to the younger generations to teach them the ins and outs of Canada and Belgium's military history is truly outstanding. And your inclusion of Canada's First Nations in that endeavor inspires us all.
Miller says the special award was started by King Leopold II of Belgium on the 15th of October, 1897. The honor can be given out to Belgians and foreign nationals who distinguish themselves in artistic, literary, and scientific work. It can also be bestowed for meritorious services to Belgium or to African civilization, rewarding both military and civilian efforts. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The city census will be making its way to our homes beginning next month in Lethbridge. City officials say 3 questions will be asked: the number of people living at the address, their age, and their sex. Residents in Lethbridge will receive a white card at their door containing a PIN number, which can be used to complete the census online. Workers will deliver the cards between April 1st and the 4th, and the census will be available online to complete on April the 1st. Census takers will also go door to door on April the 5th to collect the census cards from those who are able to complete it online. The case involving the Lethbridge mother who is charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life for her baby daughter has been adjourned until March 24th. The child's father also faces charges of alleged abuse, including sexual assault. Now, the last report we had was that the child was taken to the Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary in critical condition. Well, it looked a bit like a snow globe again today in Lethbridge. Angela Stewart is out in the field by the Galt Museum in Lethbridge with an early look at the forecast. Angela, how much longer can we expect the flurries to continue?
Yeah, Hal, our region, our city did get some light snow this morning. Thankfully, it has stopped, but more can be expected in the forecast, ending before morning tomorrow. But lots of sunshine is on the way for our region for the remainder of the week, so that's really positive news there. It'll be a great week to get out and enjoy some of that sunshine while we have it. Tonight, like I said, more flurries, about a 60% chance ending before the morning. Also do expect some light winds in the forecast and sitting at a low of -5. As for how the rest of the week is shaping up, I'll have all those details coming up later in the show.
Thanks so much, Angela. Looking forward to it. Pierre Poilievre was in New Westminster, BC, blasting the Trudeau Liberals on the home affordability crisis. Poilievre says since Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister 8 years ago, housing costs have gone through the roof and many young people may never afford a home in Canada.
9 in 10 Canadians now say, young Canadians now say they'll never own a home after housing costs have doubled under Justin Trudeau. Here in Vancouver and the Vancouver region, I should say, those costs are worse than ever. The reason is that inflationary federal deficits are moving up interest rates on our mortgage payments, and local gatekeepers block construction, driving up housing costs and making it impossible for our young to house themselves. All of this has led to despair, and everything feels broken. There's a 32% increase in violent crime after Trudeau brought in a catch-and-release bail system that allows criminals who've committed dozens of violent offenses to be released the very same day they are arrested, out on bail to reoffend again and again.
Poilievre added, in Vancouver alone, the same 40 people have been arrested 6,000 times in just a single year. He says bail reform is desperately needed right now. Federal Transport Minister Omar Alghabra says more funding is coming to clear up the backlog of complaints received by Ottawa from traveling Canadians. Alghabra says there have been a record number of complaints filed over the past few months, and they need to respond to them as quickly as possible.
Since 2019, our government has always provided more resources to the CTA to help it implement the Passenger Bill of Rights, but it's clear that even more resources are now needed to clear the backlog. So today, I'm announcing that we are providing close to $76 million more over 3 years to the agency to reduce the backlog of complaints and make sure travelers get the money they're entitled to from the airlines as soon as possible.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is still receiving a lot of heat over the alleged foreign interference into our federal elections. Political reporter Brian Lilly says many Canadians are calling for a public inquiry.
I think it was the Abacus poll last week. It showed about 67% of Canadians want a public inquiry into this. But when they broke it down by party, the Liberals were higher. 71% of Liberals said, yeah, have a public inquiry. The Conservatives were only higher by 2 points. 72% of Conservatives. It was New Democrat and Bloc supporters who were like, meh, we don't care. But Justin Trudeau's facing a supermajority of his own voters saying, we need more information.
Mr. Lilly will have more on the controversy involving alleged foreign interference into our federal elections coming up after Business News. A deal was signed by the Manitoba government to provide more access to death certificates of Indigenous children who died at residential schools. The new agreement will allow the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation to gain access to the documents from the province's Vital Statistics branch. Usually the paperwork was only available to family members. Assembly of Manitoba Chief's Grand Chief Kathy Merrick says it's important that the records be handed over and will get at the real truth as to what happened to their people. Around 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to attend residential schools over the past 100 years here in Canada. The National Truth and Reconciliation Commission estimates that around 6,000 Indigenous children died while attending the church-run federally funded institutions. You know, when it comes to treating sicknesses, it appears as though many Canadians are looking for alternative therapies as opposed to traditional pharmaceuticals. Cami Tanner, the owner of the Herbal Apothecary here in Lethbridge, says there are benefits of psychedelic therapy for mental illness, products she says that are available to help reboot the brain.
There was a lot of research being done in the 40s, 50s, and 60s using psychedelics. But the amazing thing about using psychedelics as opposed to pharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals have their place, but it's more of a Band-Aid that's covering up things and just helping people to kind of get through their day and manage the day. But the psychedelics are actually going into the body, changing the neurotransmitters, and psilocybin essentially can reset or reboot the brain so that you can have a new way of thinking and changing your thought patterns.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Cami Tanner from the Herbal Apothecary and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Alberta rock group Nickelback is going to be inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame after a career spanning nearly 3 decades. The group's lead singer, Chad Kruger, says he's humbled by the honor.
It's something that you just never expect. You know, at no point in time, 27 years ago, did we say, let's start a band, let's write some songs so someday we can be inducted into the Canadian Hall of Fame. Like, we never thought that was going to happen, but here we are. I mean, it's incredibly unexpected, and it's an honor that's really difficult to describe. It's beyond wonderful. Congratulations going out to Alberta's very own Nickelback. Crews have been rushing to repair a levee break on California's central coast. Another storm is approaching, which experts say will further wallop the state's swamped farmland and agricultural communities.
The flooding has been very widespread, with many communities being impacted. To start with Pajaro and just in general overview, we're going to see systems continue to, stay high and be wet. And so we're going to have to continue our vigilance on watching the rivers and preparing.
It was already for one flooding, so we weren't expecting a second round, so it was really unexpected.
The struggle is like them finding food and not being able to cross the bridge to go get their food. That's what worries them the most. Some people don't even have where to go to, and maybe that's what there's some people like still around.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, no rain here in southwestern Alberta, just lots of snow and ice. But fortunately, a warming trend is on the way later this week. Full weather details are coming up. You know, we were far below our average high for this time of year, which is around 5 degrees. A little bit of snow as well here in Lethbridge. Angela Stewart is out in the field by Galt Gardens in Lethbridge, braving the elements. Angela, snow today, but the meltdown may begin later this week.
Yes, that is correct. Things are shaping up nicely for our region, Hal. Warmer temperatures and beautiful conditions are just around the corner. But before the warmer temperatures and sunshine comes more snow, about a 60% chance before tomorrow morning. 6 degrees is our expected high for Wednesday. Now, Thursday is when things will start to improve, but keeping in mind that it will be a little chillier, 3 degrees for the high. Friday and Saturday reaching a high of 4 with more sun. Sunday will be the day that you want to get out and maybe take the dog for a nice long stroll, sit at the park, anything really just to take in the sun and those beautiful conditions. 9 degrees the high and sunshine there. Cooling down to 5 degrees on Monday with a mix of sun and cloud. Our average high for this time of year is 5 degrees, so we are above that average, but with that snow, it's making things feel a little bit cooler. Our average low is -7. 20 degrees was the highest temperature recorded back on this day in 1992. The lowest temperature was -29, set back in 1939. The sun rose at 7:48 this morning and set at 7:33, giving us just 11 hours and 45 minutes of daylight. So our days are getting much, much longer, which means we are inching a little bit closer to summertime. Looking at national temperatures now and conditions for Wednesday, some cloud coverage is expected for the island tomorrow and the mainland. 11 degrees the high in Victoria and 9 degrees in Vancouver. In Calgary and Edmonton, not too bad for Wednesday, -4 and a mix of sun and cloud for both of these cities. Neither of those regions will be getting any more snow, so that's great news there if you are in either of those areas. To our friends in Saskatchewan now, Saskatoon -8 the high. The wind chill quite cold in the morning, feeling like -25, warming up though as the day will go on. In Regina, not as nice, some flurries and cloud coverage for Wednesday, -6 the expected high. Winnipeg, a mix of sun and cloud, and -3, not too bad for Wednesday, I would say. Temperature shaping up nicely in Toronto, dodging some of that snow for tomorrow, sunny conditions and 5 the high. Ottawa expecting some clouds for a majority of the day, 1 the high there. The same in Montreal, clearing, and 4 degrees the expected high. Over in Atlantic Canada, periods of snow throughout the day can be expected in Fredericton with the high reaching 1. A wet, soggy day for Halifax tomorrow, 5 millimeters of rain expected. Charlottetown, a chance of snow or even rain. 60% chance of either the wet or the white stuff is on the way for that region. In St. John's for Wednesday, the same deal, snow and -1 the high. And that's a look at your full weather forecast from near the high-level bridge here in Lethbridge.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Business customers of Silicon Valley Bank expressed relief as they waited to withdraw money after the U.S. government stepped in to guarantee deposits following the bank's stunning collapse.
It was quite nerve-wracking because, all our money is primarily banked here. And being one of the largest banks in Silicon Valley, 15th largest in the US overall, I think nobody had thought that it should happen, and that in the manner in which it happened is going into the weekend. I think we were all worried of what's going to happen, but I think Fed coming in and stepping down and giving some comfort there was really, really helpful. We were panicking. I think a lot of us were panicking, and we're trying to get through in terms of how we open up different bank accounts quickly, and more so in terms of how we can, whether we'll get our cash back or, whatever money we are left with on the bank side.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland met with Canadian financial regulators to discuss the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank. Freeland says she's offering assurances in the wake of the meetings that Canada's financial institutions are secure. Canadian officials say structural and regulatory safeguards are in place and that Canadian financial institutions are stable and resilient. The closure of the California-based SVB by U.S. regulators on Friday prompted Canada's Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions to seize its Canadian assets on Sunday. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 105 points on the day to finish at 19,694. The Dow was up 336 points to 32,155. The S&P 500 was up 64 on the day to 3920, and the Nasdaq was up 239 points to 11,428. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 331 to 71.49 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to 2.57 US. Gold was down 8 cents to 1903.93 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 21.70 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.57 per bushel, barley's at $9.08, canola's at $17.16, and corn is at $10.64 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was down 50 cents to 163.05. Feeder cattle March contract was down 90 cents to 189.93. And lean hogs April contract was down 83 cents to 85.40. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 73.07 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government is investing more money so more students can take the bus. Officials say the $414 million over the next few years will address rural ride times, inflationary pressures, and rising costs for parents. Education Minister Adriana LaGrange says more than 300,000 students and their families rely on student transportation services each day, and this extra funding will help address a number of transportation issues families have been experiencing. The talk of alleged foreign interference into our federal elections is not going away. Political reporter Brian Lilly has the latest on the heat the Prime Minister is feeling right now. We shall chat with Mr. Lilly in just a moment. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Nova Scotia with an announcement, but the main issue appears that he's facing right now remains China's interference in Canada's election. Now, to talk about this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us from Palm Springs, California. Escaped the snow, did you, Brian?
For a little while, yes. Getting away for March break for a bit of warmer weather. Unfortunately for the Prime Minister, he can't escape this issue of China's attempts to interfere in our election. And yeah, he was doing a business investment announcement in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. And of course, it followed him there. It wasn't the dominant issue, but it was the first question he was asked. And, you know, it was about, can Canadians continue to have faith in our democracy? And would he call for a public inquiry, which polls show the majority of Canadians want, even if his special rapporteur doesn't call for one? It was interesting that he's not throwing around the term special rapporteur, which he does with an accent and flourish every time he says the word. He wasn't using it quite the same. So maybe he's realized that term doesn't sit well or isn't easily understood by a lot of Canadians. It's not a feature of our government system. So he seemed to be backing away from that, but sticking to the message that, look, we've got this process in place. We're going to follow the process. We are determined to ensure the safety, and you can be rest assured that everything was fair in our elections. That's not how Canadians are feeling. Even if they think the overall election result wasn't thrown by China's attempts to interfere, they still want to know what happened. And Justin Trudeau and his Liberal Party seemed determined to make sure we never find out what happened.
Brian, the Procedure and House Affairs Committee of the House of Commons began a meeting with opposition MPs trying to force a vote on having Trudeau's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, to testify. And the Liberals don't want Telford to take the stand.
No, they don't. Let me give you a basic rundown. This has been going on since the first week of March. The Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc all agreed on this motion. They've been trying to get it to a vote at this committee since the first week of March. And the Liberals at this point have spent more than 12 hours filibustering, just trying to make sure that this never happens. So Tuesday morning, another committee meeting started at 11 a.m. Eastern, scheduled to go until 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll see when they finally do break. But the Liberals are just determined to ensure that Katie Telford doesn't testify. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. They don't want anyone to know what is going on. What are they so afraid of Katie Telford saying at this committee? So, House of Commons committees are incredibly powerful tools. They have the ability to look at sensitive information in secure manners. They can have the law clerk of the House of Commons redact any documents that come forward that have information that shouldn't be made public. But the Liberals don't want that. They don't want documents revealed. They don't want Katie Telford to testify. By the way, as part of the compromise to get Telford to testify, it would also include senior Conservative campaign officials. The Conservatives said, yeah, call our people. The Liberals don't want that. And remember, the original allegation was that it was Liberals and Conservative candidates who were helped by China's consulate in Beijing. So the Conservatives know that this could hurt them, and they're still doing it. And of course, I've spoken to people, did a podcast that was released this week, speaking to Michel Junot-Katsuya. He says every party will be hit by this. And yet the only party that doesn't want an investigation at an inquiry or at a House of Commons committee is the Liberal Party. They want all of this dealt with in secret, behind closed doors, and just hope the Canadians trust them. I don't think that's the way it will work or should work.
Brian, last week allegations of China's interference extended to Ontario's legislature. A sitting member of provincial parliament at Queen's Park, Vincent Ka, was named as part of the alleged foreign interference network. Brian, you spoke with Ka about this. What did he have to say?
I spoke with him in person about this back in November, because when that initial story was published by Global News and they said 11 candidates, they also said that a sitting member of the Ontario legislature helped facilitate this, along with the Chinese consulate in Toronto. So the 2019 allegation is just in the Toronto area. And of course, we know that there have been MPs targeted elsewhere across the country. So, being based just down the street from Queen's Park, I went over to the legislature and approached Mr. Ka. I believe the date was November 17th. There was a whisper campaign saying, oh, he's the guy that they didn't mention in the Global report. And I just asked him straight up several times, were you involved? He said no. I spoke to his lawyer at length. He's a prominent lawyer in legal and political circles in Toronto, and he verbally and in writing gave blanket denials to very specific questions. So they're on the record as saying this did not happen. When this news broke, Premier Ford stripped him of his role as a parliamentary assistant. By the end of last Friday, the day that this came out, he was out of the PC caucus. That's a marked difference from how Justin Trudeau has dealt with a similar case of one of his sitting MPs, Han Dong, being named in this same alleged foreign interference network. Trudeau just defended Dong and said, look, he's a great member of our caucus. If you remember when it first came out, he said to ask questions about it was racist, but he's kept Dong in his caucus. He has kept him as part of his team and refused to do anything. So Ford said, all right, you're out until your name is cleared. Trudeau said, nope, you stay in. Very different reaction from the two leaders.
So, Brian, the allegations of China's interference not only extended to Queen's Park in Ontario, but you figure it's also made its way to Alberta?
I think that most major provinces, maybe some of the smaller ones like the Atlantic provinces, we're going to find out that China has tried to interfere. Now, is it at the provincial level? Is it at the municipal level? Alberta has vast natural resources that, of course, China wants to be a part of. The extraction, they want to be the ones that get the exports. You remember their takeover of Nexen many years ago. China has tried to be a player in the oil sands. That's been going on for a long time. So, when I speak to security and intelligence folks, they say, look, you're going to see this at the municipal level, provincial, and federal, and it's going to hit every party. So, when this claim about Vincent Ka came out in Ontario, I put questions to the office of Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Do you have faith in our provincial elections? Does there need to be an investigation? They haven't answered that. There's no specific allegation that Ontario's elections have been interfered with or tampered with in any way. There aren't any specific allegations about Alberta, but I will not be shocked if that comes out. Now, I think one thing to stress here is even if somebody got assistance from Beijing, we can't automatically assume that they're an agent of Beijing. And I'll give you an example. We know that in British Columbia, and it's going to hit BC as well, in British Columbia, Conservative MP Kenny Chiu was defeated because Beijing wanted him out. He was tough on China's crackdown in Hong Kong. He wanted a foreign agents registry. He was a supporter of Taiwan. They wanted him out of there. They sought to defeat him. He was defeated by Liberal Parm Bains, who is South Asian. He's Indian, descent at least. I'm not thinking for a second that Parm Bains is somehow an agent of China, even if his campaign got indirect assistance. I don't know that they put any money into his campaign or volunteers, but they did target Kenny Chiu, and so he's the indirect beneficiary. So we need to remember that they're just trying to influence policy. They're not everyone involved or who benefits is necessarily a spy or an agent of Beijing.
Brian, Calgary MP George Chahal says any attempt to look into foreign interference cannot stop minorities from participating in politics, nor should it. Now, is he saying, as the PM suggested, that it's racist to ask questions?
Kind of went up to the line on that, I'd say. Wasn't as blatant as the PM was a couple of weeks ago. I think the Liberals are realizing that doesn't fly with Canadians, and it especially doesn't fly with the Chinese Canadian community, who are out warning, don't listen to this line that asking questions about this or pushing for more information is racist. They say that is the line that Beijing uses to try and shut down any dissent. That is what the people who are aligned with Beijing will continue to say. Don't listen to this idea that it's racist. Last week, before this, the Ethics Committee on Parliament Hill, there was a number of people from the Chinese Canadian diaspora who appeared. There was one gentleman who says he's been fighting China's interference since the 90s in Canada and said this is their standard operating procedure. And by the way, we are the biggest targets and victims of China's interference in Canada. One of the things that's come out is the idea that someone like Kenny Chiu or Alice Wan or Bob Soroya, 3 MPs that we know were targeted on the Conservative side in the last election, part of how they lost, people were intimidated not to vote for them. People were basically worried that if they were seen going to the voting booth because they were known to support a Conservative, that they were fearful for their family back home because that message was out there. Chinese Canadians, Uyghur Canadians who don't consider themselves Chinese at all, but they're governed by China or their relatives back home they are also targeted. So, these are the victims. We can't say, let's not talk about it because we don't want to discourage people from being involved when Chinese Canadians and Uyghur Canadians are saying, ask more questions, get to the bottom of this and stop the interference.
Brian, bottom line here, is the recent controversy hurting the Justin Trudeau brand or even the fortunes of the Liberal Party?
We haven't seen definitive polling evidence yet that it is, but I think that will be coming out. Most Canadians have heard about the Chinese election interference issue. About 30% have not. Most, and this is going off multiple polls, Angus Reid, Abacus, Leger, also showing some similar numbers. They're asking different questions, but it's in the same vein that Canadians know about it. They're concerned about it. They don't think the election was stolen. As we hear talked about in the United States, but they do worry, okay, is the election secure? Is China interfering? Did they turn over any seats? These are the questions they want to know. And they want a public inquiry. I think it was the Abacus poll last week. It showed about 67% of Canadians want a public inquiry into this. But when they broke it down by party, the Liberals were higher. 71% of Liberals said, yeah, have a public inquiry. The Conservatives were only higher by 2 points. 72% of Conservatives. It was New Democrat and Bloc supporters who were like, we don't care. But Justin Trudeau's facing a supermajority of his own voters saying, we need more information. The longer he persists in saying, don't look behind the curtain, don't look at what the wizard is doing back there, the more Canadians are going to start questioning him and why he is obstructing and delaying so much.
Brian Trudeau's announcement today was about a Michelin plant in Nova Scotia, but he also made an announcement about Volkswagen coming to Ontario. As an Albertan, I have to ask, am I subsidizing the auto industry in central and eastern Canada?
Yes, you are. But look, the government also, it's tricky. I've been against corporate welfare and government subsidies for my whole adult life, as soon as I figured out what was going on. But these aren't necessarily direct subsidies the way we used to give out in the big bad old days, where companies would literally be handed suitcases of money by governments. Often it's, in the case of the Nova Scotia government for this tire plant, it's a tax break that they're going to get for investing. So they're not going to collect taxes on the company that, well, if they left, they wouldn't get anyway. So they're going to get revenue elsewhere from the plant being there. There's not as much of the direct money going forward, just like with the oil sands, which also get kind of indirect subsidies. You know, the people that want the oil and gas industry shut down put out huge sums and say, this is the direct subsidy. No, it's often a tax break for exploration, or it's a tax break for this, or building infrastructure. And we don't know the numbers on the Volkswagen announcement yet. We just know that the plant's coming, and I've been told it's the biggest auto investment in Canadian history, which means it's multi-billion. It's bigger than $5 billion, which was the previous record. I think it's going to hurt whenever we find out what the government is offering. But my understanding is in both instances, it's more along the lines of, okay, you need a road to the plant. You need, the land serviced. That sort of thing is happening, as opposed to, here's a check. Thank you for coming, which is what a lot of the American states do, whether it's for manufacturing or oil and gas exploration. It is direct subsidy. That doesn't tend to be the case in Canada, regardless of industry. But I suspect there's going to be a little bit of that in both of these.
Brian, the Trudeau government announced they would claw back more than $81 million in Canada health transfer payments, including almost $15 million from Alberta. Let me ask you, will this start a war between the feds and Alberta over healthcare?
It's going to be a war that will see Alberta, Quebec, and the federal government battling each other out. So it was, I think, just close to $82 million that they announced they're going to claw back last Friday. About half of that was Quebec, and Quebec is outraged. I think it was $14-15 million for Alberta, and Alberta is outraged. BC is between Alberta and Quebec in terms of how much money, but they're working with the government to try and change their system. This is all about our people being overcharged. Most of it is in the area of diagnostics. And I'm trying to get a handle on what's happening in each province. Are you being charged extra if you go for an X-ray or a CAT scan or blood work? How is that happening? And why does the federal government want to claw back? Because they've never done this. And it's not as if we've had a sudden massive change in our respective provincial health systems. So Alberta has said, this is wrong. You are not looking at this in the right way. Our system in place is robust. But the Trudeau government is determined to do this. When I heard about this, I thought there was a bit of politics at play, and I still think there is. They've been hard against the Ford government, for their proposals to follow Alberta's lead and BC's lead in terms of the surgeries in private clinics. But I think it's $30,000 that Ontario is being clawed back. So they're not, unless it's just for political gain, they're not going to go, try and target Ontario by taking money from Alberta. So the feds have obviously decided that they're going to look at this in a different way than they have before. Over the last 5 years, I don't think Alberta's had anything clawed back, whereas BC, it's been in the $13 to $16 million range each year. Quebec, $8 to $9 million. The other provinces, not much at all. And then suddenly, boom, they changed the rules. 81 million. 14-15 million for Alberta. That is going to start a war for sure.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Palm Springs, California.
Thank you, Hal.
On October 5th of 2022, the Alberta government announced that Alberta will be the first province to regulate psychedelic therapy. These new regulations just went into effect on January the 16th, but what exactly is it? What's it for and how is it used exactly? So here to give us some of these answers is Cami Tanner from the Herbal Apothecary in Lethbridge, Alberta. Cami, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you on today. Okay, so Cami, for those of us who don't know, first of all, what is psychedelic therapy and who would benefit from it?
So, psychedelic therapy is using things like psilocybin mushrooms to have a psychoactive experience and helping with treating mental health issues.
Okay, I have heard about this before, so now it's regulated for here in Alberta. So how is it administered? Is it literally like taking a psychedelic mushroom, or is it in a different way, a different form?
Yeah, that's exactly how it is. It's basically doing a trip, but you're doing it under the guidance of a licensed psychiatrist who is licensed to do regulated psychedelic therapy.
Okay, so it's used for mental health, mental illness even?
It is, yep.
Okay, so I've heard about people like going deep into South America and taking part in this in like some little hut. So you're telling me that people can do this now in Alberta. Is it done in a doctor's office? How? Tell me more.
So it will be done in a licensed facility. There are very heavy regulations right now. This is a brand new thing. So we're just kind of feeling our way through this, and things will change and regulations will update as this goes further on. But right now it has to be done in a licensed facility under a licensed professional.
Okay, so basically those are the rules. Can you tell us maybe more about the new rules regarding the use of this therapy that has just gone into effect January 16th?
Yeah, so it's not going to be like cannabis dispensaries where you're going to go out and buy magic mushrooms and go home and take them. That's not what this is intending for. This is for heavy mental illness therapy or treating things like PTSD, depression, anxiety that need to be done under the watch of somebody who's licensed to do this, because there's a lot of things that can come up and a lot of things that happen that need to have some guidance to go through these types of healings.
Okay, like a lot of people might think this is very bizarre. So tell me, how can a psychedelic trip suddenly cure your mental illness? It almost doesn't make sense.
So there was a lot of research being done in the 40s, 50s, and 60s using psychedelics. But the amazing thing about using psychedelics as opposed to pharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals have their place, but it's more of a band-aid that's covering up things and just helping people to kind of get through their day and manage the day. But the psychedelics are actually going into the body, changing the neurotransmitters, and psilocybin essentially can reset or reboot the brain so that you can have a new way of thinking and changing your thought patterns.
That's interesting because, I remember being a teenager and like your parents kind of preach at you, don't ever try that because it does that, just that. It changes those neurotransmitters. And to us, that seemed very like a bad thing to do.
Well, that's why it's necessary to do it under a licensed professional, because they're going to help you change those routes, change those thought patterns in a healthy way.
How exactly?
So when you go through these psychoactive trips, you're going to confront some of these thoughts or thought patterns that you're having, and they can help you walk through to kind of change the way that we're perceiving things and seeing things in a new way, and rerouting the way that we're actually processing those memories or those thoughts.
So is it that the patient in this case takes this mushroom, is tripping, I guess in a licensed facility? Is it almost like there's a psychiatrist there with them to talk them through it?
Yep, that's exactly what we're looking at now is having that psychiatrist within that therapy.
Okay. Have you seen these studies actually become, obviously there's success because the government has now regulated it. So are there any success stories? Do you know of any personally?
Yeah, there's huge success stories. I mean, you can look at Paul Stamets down in the US, who's the huge mycologist, and he's very vocal about his experience with his social anxiety disorders and stuttering. And he did a mushroom trip, and after one dose, he was basically cured. We know people here locally that are, so desperate for this new type of therapy. We've talked to some veterans who are severely suffering from PTSD and have gone decades through this trauma without success through counseling or medication, and gone through one experience with psychedelic mushrooms, and their quality of life has returned back to them.
Okay, so is there a cost to this? Is it private?
We can assume right now that it is going to be a private cost. But when you look at the way that things are now with traditional mental illness treatments, inpatient, outpatient, medication, psychologists, therapies, it can go into the tens of thousands of dollars a month. And usually that's out of pocket, where now we're looking at one psychedelic trip and you have the potential to be healed in that one-time session. So the cost is very, very low compared to traditional methods, even looking at loss of production or loss of time from having to leave your job for these therapies, and the cost of on the economy that it takes to put those traditional methods out. So it's going to be very cost effective for a lot of patients.
Okay, so how does this stop the average person then from just going out and buying a bag of magic mushrooms and going camping with their, I mean, kids, when people are young, they have done this. And I mean,
Sure.
Are there long-term studies of people who have used drugs in the past and now they have no mental illness because they use these drugs? Or is it mostly that coupled with the psychiatrist that they're sitting there with?
There's always people that are going to go out and do this on their own, because I think they've done the research themselves and seen the case studies back, like I said, when they were doing it in the 40s and 50s, and going, yeah, there is merit to this, but we just don't have things in place. So they've gone out because it has worked for them, and they've needed those treatments. But I mean, with anything, people are going to do things on their own, but for the most part, it's better to have it done under regulations, because you're going to get the best possible outcome. So that's where this kind of medical treatment plays a part.
That's so interesting. This kind of changes that whole campaign, don't do drugs, kids. Right. So Cami, how does this change with what was already available for Canadians?
This is just going to be another huge tool in the mental illness toolbox, I guess you could say. A lot of people are just not having the best results with those traditional methods. And so we're really excited to be able to have this new tool to work with that studies are showing is working amazing.
Okay. Do you know how long the provincial government has been actually working on this?
It's a little unclear. I know we've been watching the Psychedelic Association of Canada, and they put together a very large memorandum for analysis of regulation, and they submitted that to the Minister of Health back in September of last year. So I think Alberta, it's amazing that they've seen the benefits of this, that they're jumping on board. I think everybody was surprised that Alberta was the first province out of all the provinces who could have chosen this. But we're very excited that Alberta is the first province, and that they see the benefit of it, and that they are moving forward to try and do something better than what hasn't been working before.
Is this some sort of a transformative moment in healthcare for Canadians? It almost sounds like it is.
I think a lot of people, when that announcement came out, were cheering. We're very excited.
Wow. Okay, so can you maybe describe the difference then between psychedelic therapy and psilocybin mushrooms, or are they the same thing?
It's the same thing. So psilocybin mushrooms are psychedelic. So the psilocybin is what is the chemical compound in the mushroom, and when we ingest that, the body turns it to psilocin, which is the psychoactive compound, which allows you to hallucinate and, you know, affects your senses and your way of thinking. So it is the exact same thing.
Okay, is this like all natural, or has this been like chemically sort of changed in a lab?
This is all natural. I mean, you can chemically produce it in a lab, but we are looking with our company Pharmasil to produce these mushrooms and grow them naturally in a very controlled environment. But that's the beautiful thing, is this is natural. It works harmoniously with the body and doesn't really affect long-term side effects like medications can.
Interesting. Okay, I was actually just going to get to your company Pharmasil when you mentioned it there. So yeah, so I understand you and your husband own Herbal Apothecary in Lethbridge, but you've now started this separate company, Pharmasil.
Yeah, I mean,
is it basically to help?
Pharmasil, yeah. So we're big believers in plant medicine and healing the body through natural means. Medicine is great; it has its place, but we've seen the detriments and the downfalls to pharmaceuticals and long-term effects of people not being able to get off medications or lots of side effects. And so we actually started our application process back in November of 2021 and submitted our application early 2022. So we were well ahead of the game before we even knew that regulations were going to be coming out, because we believed so much in it and knew that this was going to be something that was really important to Canadians to help with their mental health.
Wow, that's so interesting that you've been looking at this for so long and been working on this for so long, and now here it is, and you didn't even know that Alberta would be regulating it.
No, not at all.
Wow. Okay, so what do you think is the motivation to use this new medical option? You're mentioning mental illness, but are we talking about, you mentioned PTSD, but could it cure a depression, anxiety, those types of things?
Yeah, that's what it's great for. And so we also have to remember that the regulations, it doesn't just include the psilocybin, but it's also LSD, ketamine, mescaline, and MDMA. So they all kind of play different parts within the brain and do certain things, but psilocybin, yes, for sure, is going to help with PTSD and a lot of stress and anxiety disorders, which it has been increasing, but ever since COVID-19, we have just seen mental illness kind of go off the charts. And so there are studies out there that shows that Canada is, I think it's ranked 3rd or 4th in the world for antidepressant users. So that just kind of shows the monumental amount of mental illness that is happening. We're in crisis mode, and we need other tools to help deal with this crisis.
Okay, so Cami, I know here in Lethbridge we have a lot of issues with opioids, but just out of curiosity, would these mushrooms be maybe an option for replacing opioid in some cases, or maybe even helping with the damage that opioids have possibly done?
Yeah, so this is not going to be a replacement for opioids. However, these psychedelic therapies can actually help with addiction recovery. They've shown a lot of promise in helping people with addictions to opioids.
Cami, are there possibly other uses outside of the realm of mental illness that this could be used for?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of people, when faced with end of life diseases like cancer, things like that, that are fearing death. They actually can take a psilocybin mushroom trip, and it brings a calmness and releases a lot of that anxiety when being faced with death in the end of their life. So it's a wonderful tool in a lot of different ways.
Okay, so it's more of a calming method mentally, not necessarily it's going to physically do anything.
Yeah, it helps them not be so afraid of death. Yeah.
So maybe let's switch away from the psychedelic mushroom therapy. And I know you have a lot of expertise with herbal options and remedies with Herbal Apothecary. So can you tell us what makes mushrooms in their various forms so beneficial?
Yeah, so we already grow a lot of functional medicinal mushrooms. It's funny because these mushrooms have been used for thousands of years as healing and as medicine. And we got away from them when pharmaceuticals came into play. And it just kind of showed, you can see how our health has deteriorated. And so getting back to a natural way is really quite amazing and really beneficial. And a lot of people are wanting to go back to a natural way because it actually heals the body. It doesn't just put that Band-Aid on, so to speak. And people are seeing a lot of changes within using medicinal mushrooms to problems that they're having.
Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, so lion's mane is a great one for brain health. There's been a lot of studies done with lion's mane mushroom that has actually on a lot of use of it that has reversed symptoms of Alzheimer and dementia. We have a lot of people that come in using reishi mushroom to help them with sleeping habits and stress and anxiety.
Wow.
So they all do really, really wonderful things. And, it's kind of funny, the old saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Right.
But we fixed it and now we're broken again. So
Wow, it's interesting how the world works. It looks like we are running out of time, Cami. Very fascinating topic, though. I've learned a lot from you, so I thank you for that. And thanks so much for coming on today.
yes, and thank you for having me. It's always great to share new knowledge.
Awesome. That was Cami Tammer from the Herbal Apothecary in Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.